Please note that the Burn It Nutrition podcast is for educational purposes only and is not meant to substitute for the advice of a doctor. Please consult your GP before using any of the techniques or products discussed on this show. Hope you like it.
Welcome to episode 23 of the Burn It Nutrition podcast. I am your host, Joseph Navarro. In today's show, we will learn how fat-adapted athletes are breaking records and showing the world the power of healthy fats. We will learn what the science says is the optimal way to fuel for endurance events like marathons while keeping health and performance as a priority. And to end this show full of useful information, we will place the spotlight on MCT oil by going into its history, the science, and ways to find the best sources of this powerful fat source. And to do this, we will be bringing in one of the leading minds in this field, and that is the very own Dr. Alvin Berger. But first, let's hear from our sponsors. For those of us that like to work out, finding a great pre-workout to take while keeping health as a priority isn't easy to find. Well, Perfect Keto to solve that issue. Introducing Perfect Keto Perform. Perfect Keto Perform packs 7.7 grams of actual beta-hydroxybutyrate. Those are the exogenous ketones. Plus it has creatine, BCAAs, and a little bit of caffeine from green tea. And now you get an additional 15% off with discount code BURNIT. So head over to perfectketo.com and apply the code BURNIT for an additional 15% off. You know, there is a lot of confusion on how to effectively apply a ketogenic diet. There's just so much conflicting information. This is something I struggled with when I first started my transformation. Well, after diving into the science, I was able to drop 60 pounds of pure fat in 7 months. And in the process, I learned so much that I knew I had to tell the world. So I created 5th Stage Keto. I put everything I learned through my own journey to health into my audiobook, giving you what is needed to see the biggest changes in body composition and finally reach your goals. And 5th Stage Keto is an audiobook that also includes the ebook, so you can see the workouts included both for the gym and for home workouts, plus recipes to some of our favorite comfort foods like keto bacon pepperoni pizza and garlic chicken with lemon zucchini noodles. Insanely good. Just head over to burnitnutrition.com to get yours, and don't forget to use the coupon code BURNIT for a bonus $5 off. Again, that is burnitnutrition.com. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Facebook under Burn It Nutrition to check out some of my progress pictures. And subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already, and even share it with your friend who wants to learn more about a healthy lifestyle in a fun way. Well, I'm so glad you're with us today. How about we get this show started? I hope you're ready because this one is a must listen.
Burn it. You are not alone as you begin this new stage of life. Learn the strategic methods to reach your goals and flourish the light within. With our guidance, you will uncover the hidden truths that have been missing from your understanding. It's time to let it burn.
One of the godfathers of fitness, Jack LaLanne, once said, "Your body is your most priceless possession. You've got to take care of it." And the reality is that taking care of this body of yours starts with nutrition. The fuel you choose to feed it will determine your overall health as well as your ability to perform on and off the track. And fueling our bodies to perform optimally is a topic that has many different conflicting perspectives. There are a wide range of groups of people whose view of nutrition is, how do I say this without sounding harsh? Flawed. You see, many athletes will put very little regard on their long-term health. Their main focus is on performing now, and so they use high glycemic sugars, gels, and processed junk to get rapid energy to perform now. They are not worried at what can come 10 or 20 years down the road. All they care about is improving their body's ability in the here and in the very present moment. And yes, I do understand that it's great to have that passion and drive to progress, but at what expense? At what cost? Here is a useful analogy to help you see the issue of fueling your body with junk. Let's go back several decades and picture that we just purchased a 1957 Shelby GT500. This is one lean and mean performance car. If you don't remember what a 1957 Shelby GT500 looks like, then look it up. They really are beautiful. Or you can remember the movie Gone in 60 Seconds with Nicolas Cage. Well, his favorite car in that film was named Eleanor, which was this beauty of a car. Well, my point is this. Let's say you just bought this brand new car, not a single mile on it. Well, surely you will take care of it, right? You won't put junk fuel or oil in it, right? Of course not. Why? Well, because you care about it. You want to maintain the engine at its best so that 50 years later it is still running and looking great. So that years down the road, this beauty of a car can be a pristine, classic car, maintaining its value and becoming a prized possession to their owners. Well, it's also vital that we view our own bodies as a prized possession. This is why it is crucial to fuel your engines the right way, to keep them functioning like a well-oiled machine, not just today, but deep into your life, so that when you're in your 50s, you too can see yourself as a classic hot rod that looks and feels great. Why? Well, because you fueled your metabolism with the right fuels. Because you put priority into your long-term health by learning which type of fuels actually harm your body and finding ways to avoid them. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to choose health over performance. No, sir. There is a way to get the best of both worlds. And in today's episode, we will dive into the science of nutrition to learn what the body really needs to perform while maintaining long-term health as a priority. And we will end this show by placing the spotlight on MCTs, which is short for medium-chain triglycerides. To do this, we will hear from one of the leading minds behind this impressive fuel source, and that is the very own Dr. Alvin Berger, an expert in the science of medium-chain triglycerides, to help break down why MCTs are showing to be an impressive fuel for long-term health and performance. But first, let's address the mainstream perspective of fueling the body to perform. Let's hear what most believe is the best method to fuel our body during longer endurance exercises like marathons and endurance cycling. I want to share their ideas on so-called optimal nutrition to help you see why this could be hurting their long-term health. And since this is the Burn It Nutrition podcast, we will be doing this with the use of sounds and personal stories. Why? Well, because this makes learning into a fun and entertaining experience, and I'm pretty sure you guys are enjoying it. So sit back and learn about why some mainstream methods of fueling the body to perform have their flaws. And don't go anywhere, because you don't want to miss out on the second part of the show when we place the spotlight on MCTs and why they are a game changer. To begin this episode, I want to remind you on how this journey began. Let me tell you the story of the moment that triggered change in my life. You see, not too long ago, I weighed in at 280 pounds and had 40% body fat and was in the worst shape of my life. Well, the moment that triggered my body transformation occurred in the Santa Monica Mountains, on my mountain bike heading down the trails, all alone, en route to the beach. It was my hobby and I loved it. I would go riding every weekend and sometimes during the week. Long miles in the summer heat, drenched in sweat. It really was a great experience. But then why was I still obese? Why wasn't I losing any weight? Well, this is because exercise isn't the main factor to address in a body transformation. Nutrition is and always will be the answer. And well, what I was choosing to fuel my body with was not allowing it to tap into its own fat reserves for energy. On those trails heading down to the beach was the moment where I hit rock bottom. This was the moment that triggered change in my life. Just picture it, 280 pounds flying down the mountain, heading towards the beach. But out of nowhere, a tree root caught my tire, slinging me over the handlebars. I had no time to react. Too much speed and force left me with only a split second where I decided to tuck my head down. I landed on my upper back, cracking my helmet and fracturing my ribs. As I laid there on the ground, looking up into the trees as the sun shined through the leaves, I actually smiled. Crazy, I know. Yes, I was in pain, but I was alive. And while I still don't know why I was smiling, maybe I smiled because I remembered my mother saying, "You're gonna split your head open one of these days." Or maybe I smiled because deep down I knew something had to change. So I gathered myself and stood up, assessed the damage, and wrote out. And that is when I decided to do something about my health. This event that triggered an epiphany began the change in me that led to the creation of this show. You see, back in those days when I was 280 pounds, believe it or not, I was very active. Again, I loved to exercise and even hitting the gym, but I wasn't seeing any results. Why? Well, because the fuel I was using to power these workouts was hindering my ability to burn my own fat. I didn't understand the damage refined carbs and excess sugars was having on my body. I was uninformed. All I knew was what I heard in the media, the same thing we all heard, that fat was bad and that eating fat makes you fat. We've all heard that if you're going to exercise, you need lots of carbs for performance. That was the truth we understood. That's what trainers and dietitians were advising, and well, who was I to think they were wrong? Before this event that triggered my transformation, before this podcast, and before the upgraded life I currently have, I can still remember getting ready to go on my very first mountain bike ride with my older brother. I remember it like it was yesterday, asking him what would be the best thing to eat before we go riding. He was my older brother, and surely he would know, right? Well, confidently he responded, "Oh bro, you want to have carbs at least 30 minutes before. Carbs will help fuel your body." I was like, okay, and he tossed me a granola bar and a banana. "Here, have these and let's go." And off we went. We hit the trails and yes, I felt fine. Now these trails that we were doing were pretty challenging. They were long with mile after mile to ride. And some of these trails had steep inclines we had to climb. Plus this was peak season and the trails were packed with other mountain bikers. Well, deep into the ride, I was starting to really struggle. The mountain seemed like it kept getting higher and higher, and I felt like I wasn't getting any closer to the top. I got to a point that I couldn't keep pedaling. I had to get off the mountain bike and slowly walk up this steep trail. I can still remember one of the other riders making a smart-ass remark as he passed me. "You know those bikes are made to be ridden." I laughed it off, but deep down I asked myself, why can't I keep up? I'm clearly the biggest guy out here. Why do I have all this energy in my fat cells, yet I feel like I can't take another step? This was a question that I have now learned the answer to. You see, my body had built up all this fat, but in moments where I needed the energy, well, it wasn't able to tap into these fat reserves. Why? Because of the insulin that was spiked from all the carbs I had right before. Like I have explained in other episodes, whenever the energy storage hormone insulin is high, hinders the body's ability to release fat for energy. Well, I took on the challenge and began a mission to learn the science of weight loss. I dove into the books. I got my certification in sports nutrition. I did everything I could. And after 7 months, I lost 60 pounds of pure fat. And it's been over 2 years since then, and I have now lost a total of 80 pounds. Yes, that is serious weight, and I did it all while keeping most of my muscle mass, thanks to the methods in fit stage keto. But so much has happened in those 2 years. I have learned so much. And deep inside, I felt I had to share it with the world, so I created this podcast. And my personal mission has been and will be to empower my listeners with the knowledge to improve their health. So I put in the long hours to create this show, to teach you the science in hopes of inspiring you to put fitness and nutrition as a priority in your life. So just to restate, even though I had all this fat on my body, the carbs I had before starting my long mountain bike rides only allowed my body to use the energy from the carbs I ate and the glycogen stores I had on my liver and on my muscles. But that is a very limited amount of energy. And once that is used up, results in a loss of focus, reduced physical performance, and even bonking or hitting the wall. This is why many marathon runners have massive carb ups the night before a race, as well as ingesting sugar gels, sodas, and other high glycemic carbs during race day. They need it to avoid bonking since their engine is only adapted to running on sugar. You see, when you're carb adapted, you need carbs for fuel. That is your only option. If you don't take them, you will bonk. This can occur because they haven't allowed their body to learn how to use fat for fuel. So when the glycogen reserves run out, their body can go into a panic from the low blood sugar. and it becomes a desperate search to find the only fuel they know how to use. And so sugar gels and even sodas come in to energize these carb-adapted athletes. But over the long haul, this method of fueling has some serious negative health impacts. Now, a fat-adapted athlete has allowed the upregulation of enzymes that facilitate the body's ability to use fat for fuel. This allows them to not have to rely on carbs for energy, but instead, they use the most potent form of fuel, which is the healthy fats on their plate and the built-up fat reserves on their bodies. But the reality is that the majority of runners are not fat-adapted. They are following the mainstream advice just like I used to do. And yes, for a normal marathon race, which is around 26 miles, one can manage to complete it just on carbs. Yes, 26 miles is very, very challenging, and I give props to all who have completed a marathon, or hey, even a half marathon. These are physical accomplishments that deserve the respect. But imagine how much better these runners would feel if they use the fuel that improves their ability to recover and perform, instead of adding additional damage from all the overconsumption of sugars. Just imagine how much better they would perform with the help of these upgraded fuel sources that are healthy fats. You see, the negative effects of fueling the body with high amounts of sugars really starts to show its ugly face during longer ultra-marathon runs. What are ultra-marathon runs? Ultra-marathons are races that are up to 50 to 100 miles long. Yeah, that's a lot. And these often go deep into the night, and it is not unusual to see runners having serious digestive issues as the miles are packed on. This occurs because there is only so much sugar gels the body can tolerate without having intense digestive distress. And some ultra-marathon runners can take in over 30 to 40 packs of sugar gels on top of sodas and their massive carb ups before the race. They do this in hopes of keeping high levels of glycogen, the form of energy that comes from the breakdown of sugars, all in efforts to avoid bonking in order to complete these truly extreme methods of racing. But again, at what cost? What is the real price of enduring these intense feats of human ability? You see, these 100-mile-long marathons on their own take the body to its limits, a truly taxing event on the body. And when you add in the extreme amounts of sugar consumption, leaves the body devastated, but from the inside out. This is not ideal if you're concerned with long-term health. Yes, the sugar may help them complete the race, but is this method of fueling going to keep them healthy years down the road? Are they going to be able to reach their 50s looking and feeling great? Remember, it is crucial to fuel your body the right way to allow it to function as it has evolved. We can look back in time and learn from our ancestors. We can see that they were great long-distance runners. They had to be. You see, when sneaking up on an unsuspecting animal wasn't an option, well, they just tracked it down. It was a battle of endurance that our ancestors got pretty good at. They just kept following it until it was tired. And they did this without the use of sugars. Why? Well, because sugar just wasn't as abundant. They did it the primal way, the way our bodies have evolved to do. And ultra-marathon runners take on a challenge that truly pushes them to their limits. They don't have the luxury to just have a massive carb up and punch through 26 miles. Their battle is much bigger, and they have to be very smart with their nutrition. And fat-adapted runners like Zach Bitter and Timothy Olsen are showing the power of a fat-adapted athlete. They have followed a nutrition regimen that implements a lower carb, moderate protein, and higher healthy fat methods of eating, and are showing all what the body is able to accomplish when the science of nutrition is applied. And they are not alone. There are other athletes who follow this method of nutrition, but like to keep it on the down low. They don't like talking about their nutrition methods. Why? Well, because it's giving away their secret to maintaining a competitive advantage. Plus, some rather not deal with all the effort of explaining this method of fueling the body that goes against what the mainstream dietitians, doctors, and trainers are saying is ideal. But again, for those that do apply it correctly, are seeing the profound benefits that can be seen on general health and performance. In 2015, Zach Bitter, a fat-adapted athlete, broke the American 100-mile record with an impressive time of 11 hours, 40 minutes, and 55 seconds at the Desert Solstice track meet. That's right, for over 11 straight hours, Zach Bitter ran in circles and circles around a track, lap after lap, mile after mile, to finish ahead of the pack and setting the American record. And he did this on a diet full of healthy fats. Pretty impressive, right? Now, Timothy Olsen, another fat-adapted athlete, is just as impressive, but his expertise is in mountain trail running. He is a 2-time winner and record holder of the Western States 100-mile race, with numerous other ultra-running wins. Personally, I think mountain running is as primal as it gets. You are in the elements, dealing with the changes in terrain and weather, raising the demand of focus required, pushing the body to its limits. Timothy Olsen thrives in these environments. You see, in his past life, he had issues with substance abuse, but he too made the choice to better himself, and running into the wild of the mountains was his method of therapy. He found inspiration and motivation in the endless trees, the surrounding wildlife, and used his time on the mountain trails as a way to meditate and gather his thoughts. And if you want to learn more about these fat-adapted athletes, then you can head to their websites. Timothy Olsen is at timothyallenolsen.com, and to learn more about Zach Bitter, head to zachbitter.com. Now, on race day, even fat-adapted athletes can and often do take in carbs. Since the physical demand is so high, these carbs are used up for energy right away. When fat-adapted, the strategic use of carbs will have a powerful impact. But there is a but, and that is that a fat-adapted athlete doesn't need to take in packet after packet of sugar goos. No, sir. They use them, but they use them strategically. And most of their fuel is coming from the fat on their plate and the fat on their body. Now, it is also good to understand that the more intense and longer training session you are doing, the more carbs you can use and still stay in nutritional ketosis. This is called a targeted ketogenic diet, which I explained further in episode 13 of this podcast. But again, the carbs are not to the same levels that the standard higher carb athletes are taking in. And also remember that on non-race days, you can also go without carbs. I once heard that Zach Bitter likes to do his regular training with minimal food intake, almost like a fasted training. He sometimes just drinks coffee with a little bit of coconut milk and a small bit of raw honey, and saves most of his calories for after the run. And one thing I want to be very clear about is that the biggest impact on general health to most endurance runners isn't all the sugar gels ingested during the race. No, the biggest factor that can lead to battles with type 2 diabetes and other serious diseases that can be seen down the road comes down to the diet that is followed before and after the race. Following a standard higher carb diet on off days and as a normal part of life should be the biggest concern. You see, the oxidative damage that occurs from the metabolization of all the excess sugars has negative impacts at a cellular level. Yes, they may look fit on the outside, but if we look under the microscope, we may see the impact of all this oxidative stress and its effects on telomeres. You see, telomeres are a crucial part of the cells that have the big role on the rate of aging. Telomeres are on the ends of each DNA strand that protect the chromosome. You can picture them as the plastic tips that cover the end of shoelaces. Well, the excess consumption of sugars raises the oxidative damage and over time begins to shorten these telomeres, bringing them one day closer to meeting their maker. And well, fat-adapted athletes shouldn't see these rates of oxidative stress when following a real food, lower carb, high healthy fat diet for the majority of their days. This allows their body to reduce the levels of chronic inflammation and helps them recover faster after a race. It also helps keep their immune system working well, and it helps keep optimal brain health from all the healthy fats. And one of the most evident benefits of applying a keto diet for athletes is during periods of recovery. You see, the reduction of chronic inflammation allows the body to heal much faster and helps get athletes ready for race day or game day much faster. Personally, I feel one of the best combinations of superfuels you can have before a long and intense workout or race is a pre-workout smoothie I take. This smoothie that I make before some of my intense workouts is a mix of superfuels that allow my body to perform while keeping long-term health as a priority. And I'm going to share it with you. Get something to write down because I'm about to give you gold. So this is what I do. I add in half serving of exogenous ketones, half serving of UCAN superstarch, and 1 teaspoon of keto MCT. Plus I add in 1 to 2 cups of unsweetened almond milk, some ice chips, and boom, I am good to go. This provides my body with everything I need to perform while keeping my blood sugar levels steady and seeing higher levels of circulating ketones. And you can go to the show notes of this episode to find links to each. So if you're an athlete that wants to try this shift in fueling, then go ahead and check it out. You may find that it is just the right shift in your training to help you get past any performance plateaus. Changing things up in your routine can be a good thing once in a while. Just make sure to give yourself a few months to adapt and fully get adjusted before going into any competition. This way you can take note on how your body responds to becoming a fat-adapted athlete. That way you can make any changes and give yourself plenty of time before a competition. Again, fat-adapted athletes are allowing their body to perform at its best on and off the track. And you too can raise the bar and help your body function to the best of its abilities. And that is what we are here to do. To learn how to provide our bodies with the raw materials it needs to get the job done in the most effective and healthy way possible. So, it is time we move on to the second part of the show, to learn of a superfuel that is showing to have some of the biggest impacts on health and performance. Let's now place the spotlight on MCTs, also called medium-chain triglycerides. But first, a break to hear from our sponsors. Now, one of the hardest parts about eating healthy is searching the grocery store for all the foods that are actually good for you. Well, now this is no longer a problem thanks to Thrive Market. Thrive Market is an online store that makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Thrive Market offers all the premium natural food brands that you would find at health food stores, but at wholesale prices and in everyday sizes. Think Costco meets Whole Foods, but online. So head over to thrivemarket.com/burnit and get a free 1-month trial, as well as 25% off your first order, on top of free shipping. Also, if you want to help support this show, then you can do this by becoming a Burnit Patreon member. This will allow us to keep this show on air, and you even get a copy of Fit Stage Keto when you sign up as a Burnit member. So head to patreon.com/burnit and help support the show you love. So we have already learned the importance of fueling our body the right way to give us the biggest impact on performance and overall health. So now it's time to go deeper into the rabbit hole and learn the science and history and the best sources of one of the most impressive superfuels we have available, and that is MCTs, which is short for medium-chain triglycerides. This way, we can get a better understanding on why MCTs are so special and how we can better utilize them. Now, in other episodes, I have mentioned how I love MCT oil and I use it all the time, but I've never done a spotlight episode on this superfuel. And well, there is much to learn about MCTs, so I decided to produce a show. My goal with this episode is to bring clarity on the topic of MCTs to help you make the best choice when looking to get these healthy fats into your diet. So let's first dive into the history of MCTs to discover a bit of their background. Then we will cover the science, and to do this, we will bring in additional brain power to help explain some of the science. We will be turning to Dr. Alvin Berger, who is a lipid specialist, to give us additional insight on this topic. So get your smarty pants on, because it's time to feed your brain the knowledge it desires. It's time to place a spotlight on medium-chain triglycerides. So, before we break down the science of MCTs, let's first hear a bit of its history. In the past few years, the popularity of MCT oil has been rapidly growing, and I'm sure that it won't be long before it's fully mainstream. And hey, that's actually a good thing. It's about time the world and media begin to let go of the old ways of thinking and constantly demonizing fats. Thankfully, many are starting to see that healthy fats should be included into one's diet. And out of all the fats that are available to us, MCTs, or medium-chain triglycerides, are showing to be some of the best to go for. So even though MCTs are just starting to gain mainstream popularity, in actuality, the supplementation of MCTs has been used for several decades in a variety of fields. One of those is in a field that many are not aware of, and that is the use of MCTs in hospitals. For a long time now, hospitals have been administering MCTs intravenously to certain patients. Why? Well, because the rapid and easily absorbed fuel that MCTs provide is crucial energy for those that are recovering from surgery or dealing with malabsorption syndromes. These are issues and disorders that reduce the absorption of nutrients. And so, hospital settings who have patients that are in desperate need of nourishment, but due to their illness or recovery have lost their appetite or ability to digest and absorb nutrients, well, that is where intravenous feedings of MCTs can come in to help bring in the energy they need to help fuel the process of recovery. And the history of MCTs goes even further back, all the way back to our ancestors. You see, mammalian milks, like human breast milk, is full of healthy fats, including MCTs. A mother's milk can have up to 40 to 50% fat, which is crucial for the development of the little baby's brain. And in our modern era, MCTs are also given intravenously to babies. They are given to babies that are born underweight. This helps give them the nourishment they need, since it has been seen that babies born underweight may have issues with lowered IQ as well as speech and reading difficulties. MCTs, or medium chain triglycerides, were also used in the 1970s and 80s by the elite bodybuilders of those days. They really were ahead of the game and used MCTs to help lean down while still providing their bodies with the healthy fats they needed. The benefits of MCTs are truly profound, but what is an MCT? What makes them so special? Well, it's time we find out. So, I want to break down some of the science of MCTs to give you a better explanation on exactly why they are so special. Okay, so MCTs, or medium chain triglycerides, is simply a type of fat. Remember, the word triglyceride is just the technical word for fats. Well, these fats come in different lengths and chemical structures. Some have more carbon molecules than others, and so these different chain lengths get categorized as short, medium, or long chain fats. And in real food, the majority of the dietary fats we consume will have higher percentages of longer chain triglycerides, with medium chain and short chains being the least concentrated. That's why it's important to make it a priority to find good sources of these elusive healthy fats that are MCTs. So again, these type of fats get categorized by the length of their carbon chains. Now the short chains have 2 to 5 carbon chains, and they are known as C2, C3, C4, and C5. Then there are medium chains, and they have 6 to 10 carbon chains, also known as C6, C7, C8, C9, and C10. Now C8 is also referred to as caprylic acid or octanoic acid, and C10 is also known as capric acid. Next, there are longer chain fats that have 13 to 21 carbon chains. Now, did you notice I skipped C11 and C12? Well, C11 is still untested, and C12, also known as lauric acid, has some controversy behind it. You see, C12, or lauric acid, has been categorized as a medium chain fat, but when ingested, it actually gets metabolized more like a longer chain fat. So technically, it should be categorized as a long chain fat, not a medium chain. So why does this matter? What makes medium chain triglycerides more appealing to us? Well, let me explain. So the biggest factor that makes true MCTs so great is the rate of absorption and the end result that occurs once they are metabolized. You see, one of the biggest differences between medium chain triglycerides, MCTs, versus long chain triglycerides is in how polar they are. The more polar a molecule is, means that it has more of a watery consistency, versus apolar or nonpolar, which means that it has more of an oily consistency. While MCTs are more polar, meaning they have more of a watery consistency than longer chain fats that are more apolar and much more oily. The polar and watery consistency of MCTs allows them to be absorbed much faster since there is less work involved in the digestive process. You see, once ingested, MCTs make their way into the small intestine. There, they are able to enter into the hepatic portal system that gives them the direct route into the liver. Once in the liver, they have two options. They either get burned right away for fuel, or they get converted into ketones to be used as energy throughout the body in tissues like muscles, heart, and your brain. That is why MCTs are so great, opposed to longer chain triglycerides that are apolar or non-polar, meaning they have more of an oily consistency. Well, these longer chain fats require a more complex process to be converted into energy, since they need help from pancreatic enzymes like lipase to break down the fat molecules to be able to be transported into the lymphatic system to enter into the bloodstream. And this longer process of digestion facilitates the chances of these long-chain fats to be stored as body fat, opposed to the MCTs that are either burned for rapid energy or converted into ketones. Again, that is what makes MCTs so awesome. Pretty cool, right? Well, this is why MCTs are very useful for performance and for those going through weight loss journeys, since they provide rapid fuel with minimal chances of being stored as body fat. Going further into the science, another reason MCTs are so great for physical performance is their ability to directly diffuse and enter into mitochondria and be able to produce energy without the help from a transporter. It's like MCTs have a VIP access and don't need to wait in line to get into our mitochondria. They just walk right in, opposed to longer chain fats that require the help of carnitine to be transported into the mitochondria. Now, this is also why L-carnitine is one of the recommended supplements found in my body transformation plan called 5th Stage Keto. So, to restate, since we are ingesting all types of healthy fats, long chains and all, on this upgraded keto lifestyle, it is smart to make sure you have enough carnitine to help transport the longer chain fats into the energy factories of our bodies. And again, MCTs are special in that they don't need carnitine to be converted into energy. This is why MCTs provide rapid energy that is similar to the rapid energy sugar provides, but without the drawbacks of raising blood sugar that requires insulin to be released and blocks your body's ability to burn its own fat reserves for energy. Isn't science awesome? So I hope you got a better understanding of the science behind MCTs. Let's now go further into this rabbit hole and learn some of the benefits that including MCTs into our diet can have. And for this, we are going to bring in one of the leading minds in this field, and that is Dr. Alvin Berger. Dr. Berger has more than 30 years of experience studying the complexity of dietary fats, and his list of credentials is long and impressive. Just to name a few, he holds a PhD from the University of California, Davis in lipid and nutritional biochemistry. Also, he has an NIH postdoctoral fellowship at Georgetown University and at Lombardi Cancer Center in lipid signaling molecular biology, and the list goes on. So let's just say he knows his science. So let's give it up to Dr. Alvin Berger and pass the mic over to him to further educate us on the benefits of MCTs. So, Dr. Berger, welcome to the Burn It Nutrition Podcast. Before we dive into the benefits of MCTs, can you tell us a bit about how you ended up studying the science of lipids?
Yes, I have kind of an interesting foray into how I ended up studying lipids. I grew up near the ocean, and I was passionate about fish, and I was studying aquaculture. I, in fact, have a bachelor's and a master's degree in aquaculture, and I started studying the diets for fish, which is the most expensive component of diets for aquacultured fish. And within that, I was studying the lipids of fish. And around this period in the 1980s, the whole fish oil mania took over, and everyone was very interested in fish oil. And so there I was working in the aquaculture field, working on these obscure farms and on streams and obscure locations. And I'm kind of a city guy, really. And I was unhappy with my profession. And so I decided to change gears and get a PhD in human nutrition as opposed to fish nutrition. And I knew a lot about fish and the oils of fish. And so I decided to switch gears and study human nutrition and started focusing on fish oils. And then over the next 30 years, became an expert on many different types of oils. And when you get a PhD degree in a program like UC Davis, you choose when you enter the program, do you want to study carbohydrates or proteins or starches or fats? And there I was. I specialized in lipids, and then I went on and got a postdoc in molecular cell signaling, focusing on lipids.
All right. Well, we are glad you did your homework. So we have heard some of the science of MCTs, but can you help us further by explaining why MCTs are so beneficial? How do they help in satiety, and what is their impact on neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia?
Well, with respect to satiety, I first wanted to just clarify what satiety means, because there's a lot of confusion on the word satiety and the word satiated. So satiated is the sense of fullness after a meal, and it's actually quite different than satiety. Satiety is defined as the amount of food that's consumed at the subsequent meal. So if a food has a good satiety value, it means you might have consumed your breakfast, but then you ate fewer calories at the next meal. So medium chain triglycerides, via benefits and acting on various gut hormones, ghrelin, and so on, lead to an increase in satiety, and one typically consumes up to 20% fewer calories at the next meal. And because of that, it overall leads to a reduction in body mass, particularly a reduction in fat mass, but while retaining lean mass. And you asked about Alzheimer's, dementia, cognition. Well, that's actually one of the hottest areas in nutrition in general, and in particular for medium chain triglycerides. And the MCTs, as you've likely know, were used for many, many years already for epilepsy. But more recently, they've been used for Alzheimer's and other forms of mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. And as background, the brain, as we age, has an inability or a resistance to take up glucose. And the brain is the number one user of glucose in the body. It uses about 80% of the glucose in the body. So when there's a resistance to take up glucose, that manifests itself in cognitive impairment and cognitive problems. So in persons that have Alzheimer's, that consume somewhere between typically 12 to 16 or even 20 grams of a C8 to C10 medium chain triglyceride oil, they see immediate improvement within sometimes 20 minutes in measurable parameters like paragraph recall, which is the ability to recall the contents of a paragraph. And that's relative to a control condition, which is often a long-term fat. But what really got me fired up about MCTs and cognition was a more recent study looking at Japanese men that were 70 years of age. And these people were termed cognitively normal, meaning they're just healthy aged people. And they gave them medium chain triglycerides, and they measured a whole slew of cognitive parameters, and they found statistically significant improvements. And when I read that study, I was so fired up, because that means essentially that we could be recommending MCTs for anyone as they get older, or you could argue for younger people as well. But if I had my way, I'd have everyone 60 years of age or older consuming MCTs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The reality is that healthy fats really are what the brain needs to thrive. Well, the profound benefits of MCT oil are very impressive. And with the rise of type 2 diabetes, which if uncontrolled can lead to Alzheimer's or dementia, is one of the reasons we have to continue to share the message of how healthy fats are a great tool to fight back with. Now, in our first part of the show, we discovered how fat-adapted athletes are breaking records by changing the way they fuel their bodies. So let's tie this all back and see what are the impacts of MCT oil on performance. Dr. Berger, I understand you also like to stay active by cycling. Considering your wealth of knowledge, how do you fuel your body to perform for health and performance? And also, how does it differ from the way you used to fuel your body before your change in perspective towards dietary fats?
Well, I came from, even though I'm a fat expert, I came from the generation of people where fat was frowned upon, and we were all concerned about the calories. And so even educated people like me went around, trying to put very little salad oil on the salad and avoiding high-fat foods and so on and so on. But I've certainly made the transition in the last 5 years to doing the exact opposite, where you'll see me with a salad, like really pouring the oil on, starting my day with yogurt, flooded with olive oil and MCT oils and so on and so on. In terms of sports, I'm kind of more what you would call a mixed regimen person. I don't do super endurance sports. It's been shown in athletes, such as the study by Cox looking at beta-hydroxybutyrate ester supplementation, that you can do quite well in sports taking some mixture of carbohydrate and I call it high healthy fats, fats like MCTs or ketone bodies, and still do quite well. So I'm not a pure fat-fueled athlete. I do use a mixture, but I have done sort of self-experimentation when cycling in France, where I deliberately let myself get to that point of being bonky feeling, where you feel kind of dizzy because you can't get enough glucose to the brain. And I was carrying around a packet of beta-hydroxybutyrate salts, and I consumed it. And I waited about 5 or so minutes, and I could feel the energy getting back into my brain, and then I continued on.
Dr. Berger, it sounds like you're applying a form of a targeted ketogenic diet. This is similar to what I and many athletes who are very active also do. But let's bring the spotlight back on MCTs. Why are they so great for performance?
But there's been, numerous studies. You alluded to ultramarathon athletes. There's been a whole slew of studies in Taekwondo athletes, in gymnasts, and in cyclists, showing that medium-chain triglycerides enable these athletes to lose weight, have a very lean body mass, but importantly, not to lose performance. And so I think there's a case to be made for MCTs for both endurance athletes as well as sports that are not necessarily endurance sports.
Yes, I completely agree. I find it very interesting to hear of MCT having a glycogen sparing or glycogen delaying effect. Yeah, so as we know, glycogen is the stored form of carbohydrates, and this is the primary fuel source used to power very intense and anaerobic exercises like weightlifting, sprinting, and anything that requires high bursts of intensity. Well, athletes begin to see a decrease in performance once those glycogen stores get depleted. Again, there is a very limited amount of glycogen, since from an evolutionary standpoint, it was used for emergencies. Well, the thinking was that since MCT oils provide such rapid energy, it acts more like a carbohydrate, and so the body uses some of these MCTs to power through these intense bouts of exercise, in a way sparing or delaying the use of the more limited glycogen reserves. So I hope you guys are starting to see why MCTs are so great. But where can we find this impressive superfuel naturally? Let's turn to the expert. Dr. Berger, what are natural sources of MCTs? Where can we find this superfuel in the wild?
Yeah, if you've looked up the technical name for C8, it's either octanoic acid or caprylic acid. And caprylic, curiously, actually comes from the Latin for goat. Goats are known as caprines, and the common goat is known as Capra ajagnus hircus. And if you hear someone talk about caprine, they mean of to or relating to goats. And so why am I bothering you with all this? It's to tell you that one of the richest source of C6 and C8 MCTs are goats, goat milk. But other mammals are also rich sources of the C8 and C10, including sheep, horse, particularly rabbit. You don't think about rabbits, but their milk is really high in C8 and C10. Rat milks, human milk are all rich sources of naturally occurring MCTs. And then coconut oil and palm kernel oil, which is distinct from palm oil, are also rich sources of C8 and C10. But coconut oil itself only contains 10 to 15% C8 and C10. So it's only with further enrichment that we get these very high levels of C8 and C10 in coconut oil and palm kernel oil.
The interesting thing is that many hear that coconut oil is a great source of MCTs, but when we look at it closely, this doesn't seem to be the case. Dr. Berger, can you help explain the confusion behind the claims of coconut oil being a good source of MCTs?
The issue is that C12, which is 45 to 70% of the fatty acids in coconut oil, is actually not a particularly ketogenic fat at all, meaning it gets stored it gets metabolized, I should say, like other long chain fats, C12 to C22 fats. That means they get transported via the chylomicron lymph route to the liver and other organs and then deposited in adipose. And this is a quite different fate than C8 and C10, which are handled by the body more like carbohydrates, where they're taken up into the hepatic portal system, brought to the liver, and then they have two fates. They can either be burned for energy immediately, or they can be preferentially converted to ketone bodies. And those ketone bodies, the ones we typically speak about, are beta-hydroxybutyrate, BHB, or acetoacetate. And those ketone bodies are taken up by organs such as the brain that we were just talking about for cognition, and then they're converted to energy via a process known as ketolysis. So they become an insulin-independent source of energy.
Now, I want to take a moment to clarify that coconut oil isn't bad. I don't want you to think that we need to avoid it. Coconut oil is a great fat source when on a low-carb ketogenic diet. But when your goal is to get more MCTs, specifically the MCTs that convert to ketones, then coconut oil is not your best option. This is because coconut oil has higher amounts of C12, which from what we now understand isn't very ketogenic. Now, you can still use coconut oil for cooking since it is very stable under heat. I even use a little bit on my hair on occasion. But when I'm looking for MCTs, then I go and get my MCT oil, okay? So, when looking to get more true MCTs into our diet, it would make sense to find a quality sources of MCT oil, which isn't as simple as we hoped. And Dr. Berger had this same issue when he was searching to find a quality oil to help his son's condition. Dr. Berger, can you please tell us the story of discovering your son's type 1 diabetes and how this led you to consider healthy fats as a better fuel source?
Well, what happens is, the American Diabetes Association, as well as the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, the JDRF, they promote this concept that diabetic children have enough stresses in life with diabetes that you should let them eat all the carbohydrates they like, despite the fact that that's the one macronutrient they can't metabolize well. And so what happened is, when my son was on that kind of diet, you're attempting to measure the amount of glucose that the child takes in and giving insulin for it. If you don't give enough insulin, then the child's blood sugar is high, and you're having to poke them back then to know what the blood sugar measurement is. So then you have to give more insulin if the blood sugar is high. And on the other hand, sometimes you see the kid getting real fainty looking and weak and needing to sit down, and that's because you've given too much insulin. And then you give carbohydrate to try to correct that problem. Sometimes you overshoot it because the kid is then in a kind of this panic state, saying, I need carb, I need carb. So you overshoot it, and then the cycle starts all over again. You give more insulin because you didn't give enough, or you gave too little, and it's a complete mess. So we were going on like that for some time, and I said, this is just crazy. So that's when we kind of got interested in the ketogenic fats. And when you're on a ketogenic fat diet, the blood sugar is much more stable, particularly on a low carb kind of diet, like somewhere between 15 to 30 grams of low glycemic carb per day, mixed with a high healthy fat MCT type regimen. The blood sugar is just much more stable and much easier to keep the child in good control. And the other important thing is, in diabetes, there's something called hypoglycemic unawareness, which is a problem when the blood sugar gets too low. Some people don't know they're low, and it can actually be really dangerous. They can be driving and crash the car and even die, and they need special dogs to live with them and help them. But when you take MCTs as an insulin-independent energy source, this hypoglycemic unawareness problem is dramatically reduced.
So it sounds like finding ways to improve your son's condition led you to create one of the highest quality MCT oils. So Dr. Berger, even though most of us who follow a low-carb keto diet understand the difference between nutritional ketosis versus ketoacidosis, there are some that still fear the risk of ketoacidosis, especially type 1 diabetics. Can you please take a moment and address the fear that some type 1s have with the increased ketones leading to ketoacidosis?
Yeah, the problem starts with the endocrinologists and the nurses. As soon as they hear the word, anything with the word ketone, they and the patients go to their doctors for the advice before they start on a dietary regimen. And the nurses and the endocrinologists hear that word ketone and they say, no, that's not for you. And so they have, there's a struggle for them to find credible people that can educate them. But the truth of the matter is when you're in diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA, that's when your pH starts lowering and it's very, very dangerous. You're in severe dehydration and you can even die. The levels, the circulating levels of ketone bodies in millimolar are about 25. But even on a high dose of C8 or C810 MCTs, the levels of ketone bodies typically do not reach more than 6 to 8. So that's 3 to 4 orders of magnitude less. And you'll see some of these estimations on the internet. To get to that level of 25, you have to eat enormous, almost toxic levels of MCTs, which you can't consume for other reasons. So the point I'm making overall then is it's a question of the DKA are just much higher levels of ketone bodies than can be achieved by consuming typical levels of MCT oils in the diet.
Dr. Berger, can you help us further understand why C8 is considered the most ketogenic of fats?
Yes, we talked about the C12 not being a particularly ketogenic fat because it forms much lower levels of ketone bodies relative to C8 and C10. When you compare C8 and C10, C8 does not accumulate in human adipose tissue at all, based on the studies I've seen. And C10 accumulates in adipose tissue some small amount. I believe it's 5 to 10%. And when there have been studies performed when they've compared a C8 medium chain triglyceride to a C810 medium chain triglyceride. In the C810 that are typically commercially available, the ratio is either 6 to 4 is the most common, or sometimes 7 to 3. So when they compare the C8 to the C810, they find that the level of ketone bodies formed with the C8 is higher. So hence we can consider it to be a more ketogenic fat.
Now, how long after consumption do the blood ketones begin to rise? And at what levels do they peak on average? And about how long do they stay in circulation? Now, I understand that we are all different and it depends on your level of activity, but is there an average that is seen?
Yeah. With the MCT oils, we typically see in people that measure their ketone bodies and also in published literature that typically about 20 minutes after consuming, there's already a good rise in the levels of beta-hydroxybutyrate in the blood. And then it stays plateaued so it depends on the individual, between 2 to 4 hours. And then after 4 hours, it starts dropping off. So by the time you're at 4 to 6 hours, it's pretty much back to baseline. And when you compare that to a BHB salt, the BHB salt, of course, it's already the ketone body, gives you a more rapid rise. So you see often within 15 minutes that it's often rising. So you get a more accelerated increase in BHB when you consume the salt itself.
So, moving on. Now that we have covered the history of MCT, the science, and its benefits, a spotlight show on MCT oil wouldn't be complete without covering any possible side effects, like the most famous of all, and that is disaster pants. So, Dr. Berger, can you cover any safety concerns that need to be addressed when taking MCTs, for example, GI distress? And also, what is a recommended dose to take? Should one take MCT oil with food to increase biliary flow? What are some helpful tips when first starting to introduce MCT oil?
Yeah, the biggest issue that you probably see in the general population is some kind of gastrointestinal distress. It usually happens when people are not adapted or adjusted to taking MCT oils, and they take it on an empty stomach, and sometimes with acidic beverages like coffee, and they just kind of shock the system, and then they get diarrhea. And because we're, in addition to whatever literature is published, because we're doing this for an occupation and selling thousands of bottles, we also have a lot of our own empirical data. When that happens, and as a general guideline, we always have people adjust themselves gradually. 1 teaspoon, then 2 teaspoons, then 3 teaspoons. There's 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, which is 16 grams. And then if they want to go to 32 grams, as some people do, we typically have them split it out to take it 6 hours later, because we mentioned a moment ago that the ketone bodies generated from MCTs are out of the bloodstream typically within 6 hours. We always have our customers take it with solid food, and sometimes with fatty solid foods, like say a fatty yogurt, to help with the stimulation of lipases and, as you mentioned, the biliary flow, which helps with fat digestion and also absorption. So I think with what we experience is occasionally there's some very, very sensitive people that have to take low doses, but in the masses of people following those guidelines, they don't have any issues. Another common question we get is, since a C8 fatty acid is technically a saturated fatty acid, people will go to their medical doctors and be advised not to take the MCT because the practitioner sees that it contains a relatively large amount of saturated fat. But the studies that have been done have not shown any increase in LDL or bad cholesterol, and usually show an increase in good HDL cholesterol. So they're not contraindicated for people that have coronary heart disease or concerns over elevated cholesterol.
Yes, most of my listeners understand that fats, even saturated fats, are healthy and essential to a diet. In episode 4 and 15, I addressed this very issue. Now, one thing I do want to clarify is that I'm sure you guys have heard that I love taking my MCT oil with my coffee in the mornings. But taking it this way is probably not smart when you're first starting to try MCT oil. Instead, when first starting out, you want to take it with food, like Dr. Berger suggested. And once your body has gotten used to this superfuel, is when you can try taking it with just coffee. Dr. Berger, I, as well as all my listeners, truly appreciate all the expert insight that you have provided. Now, there may be listeners that want to learn more about your work. Where can they go to do this?
So on the ketomct.com website, under the blog section, you'll see a number of newsletters and blog posts that I've made. You can download those and subscribe to receive those. I try to keep them pretty technical. You can also ask questions, whether it be on Amazon if you're a customer or to the website. I even have people arranging to speak to me personally to discuss. Often it's clinical situations or questions about sports. So I'm available to help people.
Again, thank you very much for your time, and we would love to have you back in a future episode.
Yeah, it was my pleasure to speak with you, Joseph. It's been a great opportunity for me.
Now, it is clear that not all MCT oils are created equal. Some brands give us blends with higher levels of C12, which we have now learned doesn't convert well into ketones. Other brands give a blend of C8 and C10, which is pretty good. And then there are brands like Keto MCT that provide some of the highest levels of C8. And well, it really depends on what your budget is and what your goals are. You see, a few years ago, when I first switched to a keto lifestyle, I used an MCT oil that had higher amounts of C12. And yeah, it still helped me see progress. Why? Well, because of the bigger changes I made in my diet, like dropping refined carbs and eating more real food. And as time progressed, I tried other blends that had a mix of C8 and C10, which I liked just fine. But the longer I apply this upgraded lifestyle, the more I like to tweak certain things to see how much better I can feel. Almost like stages to continue seeing progress. Stages. Sounds familiar. That's why my audiobook has stages to see progress. It allows you to continue to make improvements without getting overwhelmed. So, as I continued feeding my brain the knowledge it desires and dove into the research for this episode, is when I gained a better understanding of the diversity of MCTs. And so I tweaked my diet some more by upgrading to a higher quality MCT oil. And well, now that I'm over 2 years from the start of my transformation, now I'm at a stage in my journey where I'm getting closer to my goal weight, where it is much harder to lose that last stubborn pounds. And this is where little adjustments like upgrading to a more potent and ketogenic C8 MCT oil would seem like a good idea. We have now reached the segment of the show where we drop the science and find ways to get these healthy fats into our diet. So what's on the menu today? Well, considering this is a spotlight episode on MCT oil, let's address some of the different ways you can use it. Well, one of the best methods I love to use MCT oil is in my pre-workout smoothies, and earlier I gave the recipe to do this. But there are plenty of other ways to include this superfuel into your diet. There is the most popular method of adding it to your coffee. But you can also just drizzle it on your salads, or add it to soups once they've been served. Now, I wouldn't cook with MCT oil. That is where other fats like butter, ghee, or coconut oil are a much better option. You can also try how Dr. Berger takes his MCT, and that is in yogurt. I was a little taken back when he first mentioned it, but I gave it a shot and it was actually good. I also added some nuts for that crunch. And the reality is that MCT oil is odorless and tasteless, so it didn't change the flavor. Now, when I need a quick jolt of energy, but I am in short of time, I simply get a handful of nuts and a tablespoon of MCT, and I take them together. This kind of tastes like a nut butter that is quick and easy. These are a few of the ways to include MCT oil into your day, which will help give you that focus and all the other benefits we mentioned earlier. Well, we have now reached the end of another episode of the Burn It Nutrition Podcast. I hope you guys got some good takeaways from the show. My goal was to help give you everything you need to know about MCT oils. That way, when you do decide to try some, you know what to look for. Whether you choose Keto MCT or any other MCT oil product, now you're an informed buyer, so you can pick the MCT oil that is right for you. For me, there are certain supplements that I will always make sure to include in my day, and I firmly believe that MCT oils is one of those supplements, as well as fish oils and vitamin D. These are supplements that play a huge role in our overall health, and finding ways to include them is a priority of mine. Which brings us to the review of the week. And this one is from Luis97, and he wrote, Top Keto Podcast. I just want to say that Joseph is a very intellectual individual that delivers well-thought information regarding the keto diet. I definitely would recommend this podcast for anyone interested in keto. Take a listen and share it. Luis, my man, you just put the biggest smile on my face. Top Keto Podcast? Ah, shucks, you're making me blush. In all seriousness, thank you very much for those kind words. And yes, share away. This goes for all of you. Tell your friends, your family, anybody about this podcast. I'm sure they will love to hear all about the science. Plus, I'm sure they will be entertained. Also, don't forget to click on the show notes of this episode to find the links to some of the great discounts we offered today. Now, I know it took me longer to publish this episode. Well, this wasn't because I was at home watching TV. I actually haven't sat down to watch TV for close to 4 months. I just don't have time for it. But anyways, the reason I took longer is that I was working on launching the YouTube channel of Burn It Nutrition. Yup, now you can check out episode 1 through 3 on YouTube. So next time you're on YouTube, check it out and subscribe and share and say hi. Let me know what you think, and I will try to make it better. Now, what's great about YouTube is that it helps us connect more easily. You see, some of the best parts about being connected across the whole globe is that it brings us close enough to encourage and motivate each other, almost like we're sitting across a campfire telling stories. Having that social support around the campfire was one of my favorite memories. The close fellowship brought out the best in our friendships. So this pretty much brings us to the end of another show. It's October now, and the year is starting to come to a close. Well, October is one of my favorite months. I love all the haunted mazes that go up, and I make sure to go a couple times every year. They are such an adrenaline rush. The funny thing is that, yeah, I love haunted mazes, but I hate scary movies. Scary movies just feel so long. Haunted mazes are scary, crazy scary, but also they are much shorter. Plus, there's usually a cute date holding on tight. Hey, some of the perks of working out, right? Well, the reason I bring this up is that I want to do a Halloween-themed episode. That's right, come back next time and prepare to get scared straight. I need to work on that scary laugh. Anyways, the episode's still going to be about fitness and nutrition, but I'm going to allow my creative juices to flow in a way that gets us ready for Halloween. That's all I'm going to say about it for now. You are just going to have to come back next time. That is, if you're not too scared. And don't worry, you can keep the lights on. Well, until then, I do hope you have subscribed to this show, because it's never the same when you're not with us. Now brace yourself, because it's time to let it burn.